Thank you all for tuning into the Innovators Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Seth Narayanan, founder and CEO of Tellian Systems. Today we have Jim Hewitt, a veteran healthcare technology innovator whose career spans transforming hospital IT and electronic medical records. He helped build and scale early EMR platforms like Enterprise Systems and Allscripts, founded Jardogs to pioneer universal health record, and now leads Jardogs AI, creating an operating layer above the EHR. Jim brings a rare blend of hands-on programming, executive leadership, and deep empathy for clinicians and patients navigating today's complex healthcare system. So, Jim, welcome to the Innovators Playbook podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by giving the audience a little bit of background. You grew up in the Midwest, working in the family grain elevator business. How did that shape you to work and think more about technology?
It was a family-owned business. I was fourth generation, single son to take over that business. I started in the grain elevators at a very early age, sweeping floors and doing whatever I could to help the family. It's a lot of work, 50-pound grain shovel in a bin, 110-degree weather, shoveling all day type of stuff. So that creates a great perspective on what you want to do with your life. Grain elevators play the future market pretty heavily. We started getting into technology to help us try to manage our grain elevators, connect them through Novell back in the day, and then started trying to personally code and build some systems to help us automate across the board. On the flip side, I was also in sales. So I was trying to sell farmers. We used Kent feeds, so 40% GM base on how to feed your hogs more effectively. I was doing seed corn sales door to door. Building those relationships with the local community, providing a viable service was great. My ultimate passion was, once I got into programming, that was my hobby and passion more than running grain elevators. My dad was very technical, but was heavily into ham radio and different type of technologies had always interested him. So he had brought IBM System 23s into the grain elevator to help us run our business. And me being a teenager at the time, I was fascinated with the one game that was on the IBM System 23, which was the adventure game that you're standing at a Y in the road. What do you want to do? And you'd have to type, look down, go right, go left, or pick up the lantern. So that's my first introduction into computers, was just playing that simple game. My mother had seen this little itty bitty computer on TV and she bought it. It showed up a couple of weeks later in a little box. We opened it. Yeah, I'd connect the coax cable and then the bunny ears onto the back of the TV. And we built it all. We got it set up, put it on channel 3, turn it on, and we just got a prompt. That was all there was just this prompt. And so my sisters and my mom and everybody was like, oh, this sucks. They all left and I was digging through the box and I found a Visual Basic programming guide for this computer. So I started just to read it and it's like print quote hello. So I typed in print hello and bam, hello shows up on the TV screen. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. Showed you how to do input and they had the if then go to statements in VB that I could go to these lines. And then immediately it clicked to me, it's like, oh my God, I could write an adventure game. So I stayed up all night. I was building my little adventure game. My dad always showed up around 4 a.m. to pick me up to take me to the grain elevator. And I was hard at it. And it was like 3 a.m. I'm like, oh my God, I built out this game. I was all excited. It's like, I have to save it. The only way that you could save that at the time is through a cassette tape. I'm rummaging around a house. I'm looking for a cassette. I get it all plugged in. And then I type in the save command and the cassette runs. And then the big reveal came. It's like, okay, shut off the computer and restore. And I went to restore and my game was gone. So when my dad picked me up, I was all in a bad mood. I hadn't slept. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, told him the story. He didn't say anything to me. We get to the grain elevator. He asked me to come into the office. He walked in the back room and he came walking out with this huge stack of manuals. He dropped it on the table and he's like, learn this, that SOB won't lose your data. And he was talking about the IBM System 23. He gave me all the programming guides for IBM System 23, which happened to be Visual Basic as well. to teach myself VB at the time. And then once I got hooked, then I got my Commodore 64 and all those new personal PCs that came out. Some of them was assembly language. A lot of them were VB based. But anyway, so I started just consuming and teaching myself how to program. And that really became a passion and a hobby. Some of my friends were at University of Illinois and they were sending me languages to learn. And it just continually grew from there that I was building my repertoire of different development languages.
Get a job in the software business. How difficult was it to you and more probably to your father and your family? So how did that play out?
Yeah, that was really rough for me. My girlfriend at the time, her family would vacation between Christmas and New Year's in the Wisconsin Dells. They asked me to go up with them. So I went up there and I met a gentleman that was starting a software company in Chicago called Enterprise Systems. We started talking about all the projects I was doing, some of the stuff I was doing on futures analysis, through all that analysis. And he's like, you need to come work for me. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. I'm fourth generation, only son. Can't do that. And anyway, he just kept on saying, no, you have to drive through Chicago. Just come see my company, interview. And I'm like, I don't have clothes. He's like, I'll make it a casual day. I'm like, I don't have a resume. He goes, you can type one on my home computer. All right, fine. So I went and interviewed with them and they offered me a junior programming job because I didn't have a degree in programming. I was an ag guy. They offered me that position and had made a really hard, probably one of the hardest decisions in my life was to pursue my passion. So I agreed to that position, had no idea what I was doing, went down and then called my dad and said we needed to meet and told him I was leaving, which was tough. It was a really tough thing. So we moved to Chicago January of '89 with really no money in my pocket to go pursue this new opportunity in healthcare. So that got my start into healthcare.
Interesting. So yeah, this was in healthcare and hospital. And I think even today, hospital IT is, I guess, relatively speaking, a little underdeveloped, right? So I'm sure back in those days, it would have been even more so. But I guess technology itself, software itself is fairly new in those times, right? So tell me a little bit more about the experience you had in learning about hospital IT and what you learned from there.
Yeah. So, just to start with the company a little bit, the Enterprise Systems, founded by a brilliant man. He was a Baxter executive. He was out on the West Coast, walked into a computer shop back in the day and saw an Apple IIe and was enamored with the Apple IIe. So he brought it back to Baxter, said, I think this is the future of healthcare. His term that he always used is that he was fired with enthusiasm when he left the company. So he founded Enterprise Systems in Chicago, focused on the premise of basically removing mainframes out of the hospital and converting them to a paperless environment. So great vision, great focus, was ahead of his time on exactly what that meant. Now, when you look at that vision and you want to use PCs, you got to lay down networks. Mainframes did not run on a network, or you didn't have servers, you didn't have any of that infrastructure whatsoever. Luckily for me is that my dad had picked Novell as a way for us to network our computers at the grain elevators. So I had learned Novell. It was brand time coming in. So token ring networks is what the main backbone was, plus Novell. I did not know their main programming language, which was Pascal. I had a pretty heavy lift on just learning Pascal, getting up to speed. And we were using a database technology called Btrieve at the time, which was also provided by Novell. So learning Btrieve, learning Pascal, and then on top of it, healthcare. So I knew nothing about healthcare. Just an amazing group of people at Enterprise Systems in the early days that did have core domain expertise. You find a really great development client. In our case, it was Highland Park Hospital in Highland, Illinois, which was probably 15 minutes down the road from our office. They were our primary SME as we were building out these products. So we would be building and then driving over to Highland Park Hospital on a pretty regular basis, meeting with their staff. They're teaching us how to learn. Also, Ravenwoods Hospital, when I was building out the asset management product, I was down in their basement with all their people, and they were teaching me all about asset management in hospitals. So for me, it was just great hospitals, great partners, and an amazing staff to help us do that. Healthcare is a very emotional business, and he did a really great job of connecting his employees to the mission. And we all lived and breathed that mission of actually creating better healthcare for the United States.
Was the term EMR or EHR already prevalent, or what class of software is what you guys did in enterprise systems?
Yeah, so we didn't do EMRs. We did pretty much everything else. Financial systems, the OR room scheduling, reporting aspects, preference lists for physicians, purchasing, receiving.
It's kind of ERP for a hospital.
Inventory management up on the floor. We were right there at the very beginning when barcodes first came out. We were literally printing and putting barcodes on supplies at the time because barcodes didn't even exist back then. We did some of the very first EDI transactions. We also were one of the first companies, if not the first company, that really built just-in-time inventory. So moving all the big warehouses out and going to just-in-time with EDI to the suppliers was another very big move for us. And then we built a really cool product called TouchScan up on the individual hospital floors for inventory management. We called it TouchScan, where literally you walk into supply, touch the patient name. There was all there right on the wall. We had actually built a device that had a screen and a scanner. You grab the thing, scan it, it would automatically bill the patient, decrement the inventory, and then based on our DOP, DOQ strategies, it would auto order based on what we had.
Wow.
Also, Tom had bought one of the early patents on RF technology. So we were then implementing RF inside of hospitals, tracking people, devices, and even babies. Just a really innovative time. Technology was changing very rapidly. PCs were changing at an insanely fast rate. Email hadn't even been invented yet. So just even working on the first email systems. And then the networking side, of course, Novell started to sway a little bit. So we converted over to all Microsoft-based technology. Another great name is, we were just laughing about the other day, is that Borland. I don't know if you listen to the company Borland.
Absolutely.
Man, Borland was the stuff. You know, we would compile on Microsoft compilers back in the day, and it would take 2-3 hours just to see us get through a compile. Borland came in and it was 30 seconds. It was just a life-changing moment. And, you know, once we got debuggers versus doing print lines inside all our code, you know, it was just revolutionary on how fast we could develop. So, and then Microsoft SQL Server came out, so B-Tree got switched out, and then I had to make the decision on what GUI we were going to go with. So either OS2 or were we going to go Windows? I had to make that decision, which was a really tough decision. And I picked Windows, even though OS2 was so superior in every way. Every developer in their garage was using free compilers from Microsoft to build products on Windows. So I'm like, Windows is going to win. The developer community's behind Windows, not OS2. So we went the Windows route. We went the Microsoft SQL Server route and just had to learn all those technologies and build that out. And Ethernet came about. All that happened while we were at Enterprise Systems. So it was just an amazing time if you're a geek, because I was part of a fast growing company, and we were technology based focused, and we got to play with all of it. Even some of the first AI models that came out, we were doing neural networks at Enterprise Systems and playing with them. They sucked, but it's the same basic algorithms that are still used today. It's just we didn't have any processing power or data to really make it all work. But yeah, pretty crazy.
I do remember working on or getting introduced to Borland. In fact, I went the cheap route and got Turbo C and Turbo C++.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had Turbo Pascal, of course, because and then when the object-oriented version of that came out, we were all like,
was that Delphi? That was our before.
They didn't call it Delphi at the time, but yeah.
Okay. That is cool. We can talk about that a lot. But I'm there, and OS2, I also had the opportunity to work on OS2, although you picked the right choice there. Unisys had some products that were built on OS2. It's kind of really weird. And as the story of OS2, it rolled itself out.
It was a tough decision because we were selling hardware at the time. We were laying down infrastructure for the hospitals, taking out the mainframes, we're dropping PCs, we're dropping servers. We are big blue, IBM through and through.
Yeah.
It was a big decision. So I basically tell people I sold my soul to Bill Gates when I made that decision.
Yeah, no, but I think that was the right choice. Let's talk about then. I think Enterprise Systems got acquired by Allscripts at some point, right?
Well, part of it did way down the road.
Okay.
Enterprise Systems ultimately went public and then got acquired by McKesson HBOC.
Ah, got it. Okay.
They held that asset for quite a few years. Enterprise Systems, and I'm pretty sure my numbers are close, but 1,800 hospitals across the United States and Canada is what we ended up implementing. It was
That was
a great company.
so. Did the Enterprise Systems raise any money, or was it all organic?
We had investors and a board as a private company, and they also had an ESOP, which was nice.
That's good. Yeah, for you were probably one of the early employees there.
I came in right around 96, I think, at the time. So they had already built out a sales force, and the development team was maybe 20 people when I came in.
Yeah, cool. And then what took you to Allscripts after that?
Yep. So before I went to Allscripts, I was figuring out what I was going to do next from Enterprise Systems. One of my buddies that had worked at Enterprise Systems, actually a couple of them had moved to a company downtown Chicago that was working at the Options Clearing Corporation at the Board of Trade. So they were in the financial side, and the company that they work for, the Options Clearing Corporation, is a SEC sanctioned monopoly that actually holds all the positions in the options market. Their technical term is they're the issuer and guarantor of all exchange traded options. So they were down there and was dealing with the exact same problem that Tom was trying to solve, but in the financial space of removing mainframes out of their office, but also all of the clearing members, which are all the large financial institutions, the Merrill Lynch's, Paine-Webbers, such. Anyway, they'd asked me to come down. They had started a new project called Next Gen. Of course, everyone has a Next Gen project. And so I went down there and saw what they were trying to do. And they were looking at SQL Server / Sybase, which really was the same product back then. I think it was 4.2 was when it finally switched. But they're looking at Sybase instead of DB2 on the mainframe. And then they're also looking at Power Builder as a potential solution. And I'm like, I would not use Power Builder for this. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no. Do you have Visual C++ here somewhere? And they're like, yeah. So like, you please move. And so I sat down and started banging out and building some forms and getting some screens up while I was just down there. And they're all looking at it. And we went to lunch, and some of the senior execs went, and they're like, hey, you need to come work for us and help us build this out. Mainly an amazing project for me. Since they're an SEC sanctioned monopoly, that means they don't really have any competition. Any money that was left over at the end of the year, we give back to our clearing membership. So they had very large budgets on technology. So when we started to re-envision what the next generation real-time clearing system would look like versus a batch system, we also wanted to cover real-time risk analysis on everyone's portfolio as the price changed. Just think of every position in options in the United States getting reevaluated on every price tick. It was kind of the problem that we were trying to solve. The reason that was the case is that in the old days where the markets used to crash or stop, the real reason that was happening is because it was batch trading on the floor. So the clearinghouse that maintained all the positions has no idea what's going on the trading floor until we get that batch tape that would come in with all the trades. So when you'd stop the market, you would have to get that tape in, run it through the system, and then reevaluate everyone's positions to decide who you're going to make margin calls on. So the idea was, could you move that to a real-time trading system so that we could do real-time risk assessment so that you could be making margin calls throughout the day without having to bring down the market. Anyway, it was just, I was at the right place, right time, just lucky to be a part of another amazing, brilliant team that also had the resources to be able to look at new technologies. One of the first published subscribed architectures was actually built there because we were looking at trades coming off the floor being published and then having n number of scalable consumers on the back end side to consume those trades, as an example. Before I went to Enterprise, I was down there doing that and had probably learned more there than anywhere else in my career, just on really object-oriented technology, architecture design. And we got to evaluate every database known to man and every development technology or programming language that was out there. So pretty cool. But after we finished that project, one of my close friends from Enterprise Systems had seen this company, and then Glenn Tolman, who took Enterprise Systems public, had run into this guy, I think it was at a soccer game, where he had a company that was a medication repackaging company that bought big bottles of pharmaceuticals, put them in prescription sized bottles, and then sold them directly to doctors. The idea was that when I needed my amoxicillin for my child, I could just get that right there at the doctor's office and not have to go to the pharmacy. That was their model. And that broke hard when the PBMs came into the market, where I could pay $30 at the doctor's office, but if I went to the pharmacy, I could pay my $5 copay. Allscripts did not have the technology to be able to adjudicate those claims. So they were struggling hard. Glenn came in and saw the opportunity to still keep the medication repackaging business, but bring technology in to do the adjudication and use some of the revenues off the medication repackaging side to help pay for the technology that we'd be bringing in on the prescription side. When I talked to Glenn, he's like, hey, I think I found a way to automate the second largest paper transaction in the world. He goes, you know what that is? I'm like, no. He goes, prescriptions. He said, checks are number one. Glenn had this amazing vision that if you look at prescriptions, writing them on prescription pad, not being able to read them, getting all the callbacks from the pharmacies, the safety issues associated with all of that, that we could use technology to solve that problem. So we went out and built the first wireless electronic prescribing application, helped build NCPDP, which is the industry standard for communicating scripts to pharmacies, and started building out Allscripts. So I left the OCC, came in to Allscripts as their CIO, and started down that path with Glenn.
Interesting. So that was big. You switched from healthcare to markets and fintech, and then back into healthcare. So there was a lot of learning of domain in and coming into this pharmacy e-prescribe business. That's
a lot of change. The option market was a pretty complex environment on how all of that worked, and models associated with risk and risk adjustment, and how people get assigned off the wheel on the option side on puts. But yes, there was another steep learning curve coming into the finance side. I had an amazing team that was very patient in helping me learn.
When you were at Allscript, you worked with them and you had the experience working with offshore teams, right? Tell me a little bit about it. You've been to India a few times. What has been your experience working with teams and actually being in India?
Yeah, the overall experience has been amazing. We were probably 3 years into development when we decided that we were going to take a look at India to see if we could get some help on the development side. Glenn had been working with some other companies that had some success in India. And so we decided that we were going to take a look at small, medium, and large Infosys level organizations in India. So we started doing our diligence to find smaller shops, those medium shops, and the big shops. Got all those meetings set. And then one of my colleagues and myself got on an airplane and we flew into Bangalore after a very long flight. I think we were spending most of our time in Bangalore visiting those individual organizations. But the medium-sized shop, the name was Health Assist. Umesh Bajaj is the CEO, still there today, just an amazing man. And he took very good care of us. We came in, we did all of our different interviews over a week, got to do a little bit of sightseeing, but just an overall amazing experience. Everybody was really nice. We had Domino's pizza, I think every day, which was odd. I do have all kinds of stories and experiences of not Domino's pizza, but we did have our very first experience at the Bangalore airport. Was a little wild at 2 a.m. There was a lot of people, a lot of craziness, couldn't find our driver. But overall, the experience that we had at India was great. And the reason that we wanted to look at all three, we were really worried about overall integration into our development processes. And the small shops pretty scared us because when we went and visited them, they're basically in people's houses. It felt like anyway. Umesh had the mid-size organization, and then I think it was Infosys or a couple other ones that we looked at, massive campuses.
Yeah.
And in discussion with them, I wanted someone isn't that like, here's a chunk of work, because we had daily stand-ups and we're bouncing ideas off each other and our products are all integrated. So I wanted someone that was just part of that team and worked into our workflows, checked in, everything the same way we did. Infosys was an absolute no. They're like, you give us the specs, you give us the thing, we go off, we develop it with our own processes, and then we return you code. I wanted a team feel just like they're an extension of us. Didn't want to drop our own building and hire our own people at the time, but that's what I was looking for. Health Assist was able to do that for us. They dedicated, I forget how many resources out of the gate, but a decent amount of resources, integrated them into our overall teams, and we had a pretty successful relationship with them for many years. Now, after I left Allscripts, we did some more acquisitions. Those acquisitions also had teams over there. So it ultimately switched out of Health Assist, and we ended up building 2,000 person buildings over there in multiple cities, and we expanded dramatically.
Interesting. We'll catch up on your India story sometime later.
Some crazy ones.
So at some point you decided to step away from Allscripts and take care of some of their personal business.
Yep.
Talk about that a little bit, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Was at Allscripts, was traveling a lot. We had 4 small kids. My wife was taking on a heavy burden of just trying to deal with them while I was doing my thing. And then we got this horrible call that my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Taken aback by that. And the thing that really was rough on me is that I was so focused on career and what I was doing there that I had not engaged my family with my kids. My kids didn't really know my mom that well, and she'd come up once in a while, but we really hadn't spent a lot of quality time. I made the right decision. It was another tough decision, but I decided to retire from Allscripts and move back down to Central Illinois with my children so we could spend time with my family. And my mother, uprooting them from Chicago and coming down was interesting, but yeah, I think it was the right choice. We came back, got to spend about 4 years with my mom before she passed, which was amazing. We got to travel and do this that she wanted to do before that happened. But, you know, in the retirement, I was just a crazed man. I didn't know what to do with myself. So doing a lot of different projects, trying to help the community. I took on the local baseball, softball leagues, and then was trying to help out in other areas that I could and spending time with my kids. I was restoring a 67 Mustang and just whatever I could do to keep busy. And I ended up getting a call from the CEO of Springfield Clinic in Springfield, Illinois. Gentleman's name is Mike Maynard. And he had called and said, hey, I think his exact quote was, hey, you remember that shit you sold me? Can you help me implement it? And I'm like, what? And he goes, there's only 2 things that's going to get a CEO fired this day and age in a healthcare. He goes, 1, changing the physician compensation formula, or 2, implementing an EMR. He goes, I'm retiring in 5 years and I've already changed the compensation formula and I'm not getting fired over the EMR. I was like, Mike, I understand and I really appreciate it, but that's not what I do. I just don't do that. And anyway, he was persistent. He kept calling back. And as the story goes, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I finally agreed to meet with Mike, and they swear that I showed up in a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops to this meeting. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, met with Mike and just absolutely and fell in love with him. Just an amazing man, amazing vision. And so I decided to do a 3-year contract with them to help them implement their EMR. And they're a large organization, had about 23 different locations. And so, you know, this is converting from paper to an electronic EMR. So came in as CIO there, and just another lucky, amazing experience with a great group of physicians and a visionary executive team.
Was that
Allscripts? Yeah, so they were on Allscripts TouchWorks, which was the first EMR that we had built, which was a great EMR. but they were just struggling with getting the implementation going, but they didn't have infrastructure. They needed computers, a server room, they needed archive backup strategies, all of that stuff across the board. The board was very supportive. The executive team was very supportive, and we had a very successful implementation there. And so, spent those 3 years with them, got through the implementation, and then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next with my life. Being on that side of the shop, for whatever reason, Mike also made me in charge of the IM department, Health Information Management department at the clinic. So I had transcription services, I had all those pieces plus the medical record. And when I started looking at it, it's like, man, it's just crazy that the patient owns the medical record, but yet I have to pay $20, wait a week before I can get access to my record, even though it's my record. The organizations are just custodians. And then just looking at how fragmented our medical record is as a human being. I was born in this hospital, I was there, and there's no aggregated view of my longitudinal record. That's what really triggered me into thinking, why don't we spin off a company to give the record back to the patient? And can we build technology that aggregates all of that data across all these disparate EMRs, harmonizes them into a common language, and then give the patient control of the record? So that's where we spun up the company Jardogs, and Jardogs' first major product in the marketplace was called FollowMyHealth. I think when we had finished, there was around 40 million patients using FollowMyHealth. So a good chunk of the US population was on it, aggregating their data and sharing their data across. We started Jardogs with that vision and mission. Tough to be in the startup mode, but we were making good progress. We were starting to knock down some clients, and then meaningful use hit. The government came out with meaningful use 2 criteria. And part of the meaningful use criteria was every certified EMR needed a portal. We didn't view ourselves as a portal. We called ourselves a universal health record because we were a personal health record. Plus we could tether 2 different EMRs and aggregate that data. So I didn't want to confine us into the space of just a portal. We're really not a portal into an EMR. We're a universal health record that manages. So anyway, we were building that out, and you hit, and everybody kept calling me going, oh my God, the government just mandated your product. And they're like, you got to be so happy. And I'm like, I think it's the worst day of my life. They're like, how can this possibly be the worst day of your life? The government just mandated your product. And I'm like, yeah, but everyone's got to make a buying decision in the next 8 months. And I have a tiny sales force. How do I get word out that you need to buy my product across the entire nation in 8 months? It's just not reality. And so we were trying to figure out go-to-market strategies. How could we do this? Because EMRs were partnering with portal companies or building their own portal. So the easy button, of course, is just to implement a tethered portal. But to me, that wasn't good for overall US patients, because you need to aggregate that data across multiple EMRs. So don't tether to a single EMR, build one that you can use across all EMRs. And anyway, we were struggling with that, but for us to be able to survive as a company, we had to make another tough decision and partner with somebody. The new CEO from Allscripts came down and met with me and said that they needed to do something. We made a decision to go back with a different CEO, but back with Allscripts. So we sold the company to Allscripts to drive FollowMyHealth across their base. Now, we still supported other EMRs, but that dwindled pretty heavily as we were really considered in Allscripts portal at that time. But saved the product. They grew substantially and became pretty crazy brand name of FollowMyHealth and FollowMyHealth doctors and all of that fun stuff. It was a fun ride to see that product explode because of those regulations.
No, that's phenomenal, because I do remember the meaningful use days, and that was crazy. There was so much technology being shoved down the doctors' and providers' throats in such a short time.
I would say from a physician experience, it wrecked the provider. They didn't like EMRs to begin with, but when MU2 requirements forced them to be data entry clerks in the exam room, it was over.
That was crazy. I mean, I'm glad that all those records are available electronically, but it's just a crazy thing. That kind of brings the conversation to AI and how AI is helping that process, right? So now that it's mandated, everybody has to use electronic health records, all the
Yep.
providers. So tell me about, you left Allscripts again, right? After your second stint, and you're working on something back to the Jardogs, but with AI. Right.
Correct. So I left Allscripts about 3 years ago. We made the decision to separate the company and sell off certain assets to another company. So the EMR separated out. After that happened, I decided that I would go back into retirement. I was traveling a ton again. And so just felt right to go back and just spend some time. When I was doing that, I'm still a developer by heart. So I'm always building stuff, different things. I was heavily into IoT devices, and I had seen some technology with Google that was really cool database wise. So I've been playing with that and just building a bunch of stuff and enjoying my retirement that way. And then I got some early keys to OpenAI a couple years ago. We had been talking about AI back in the enterprise systems days, all the way through Allscripts. AI to me was not real. You got into machine learning and then, the AI side, and there was some noise, but, it still wasn't real. When I got the OpenAI keys and tried it out, it was like, holy smokes, AI is real. It was slow. The first thing I asked it to do was create a clinical note. The prompt was, hey, give me a clinical note. It knew the structure of a SOAP note. It hallucinated everything because I gave it no context, but it knew what it was. It was slow, but it was great. So I started playing with AI, and I was doing a bunch of different little projects and just playing along with that. Some of my CIO, CEO friends of health organizations would reach out every once in a while. I was like, hey, what about this OpenAI thing? I'm like, yeah, it's great. They're like, yeah, some companies are starting to emerge that are trying to do some noting with it and stuff. I'm like, yeah, unless you have full clinical context, I don't know how you stop it from hallucinating. Performance wise for a doctor, not sure. And they're like, you should get in that game. And I'm like, no, I'm not getting in that game. I'm a note snob. I just know I'm not going to do that. And so anyway, kept messing with it, and happy year, 6-7 months clicked by. And then I got some early access to their real-time API. I'm sure you guys are used to that, where the conversational communication via voice translated in, AI immediately communicating back, and text to voice. And so I started playing with that, and it's like, okay, this actually got my attention and got me up off the couch, because my view of the world, coming back to that longitudinal record, if you look at a patient's longitudinal record in a data science sense, really a tiny amount of data, even from birth to death. It isn't a huge amount of data. So if you could take all of that data and give it to AI and seed it, and then bring AI into the exam room with you, with AI knowing everything about you or the patient, is there value there? So I've been messing with a bunch of different technologies. I'm like, well, can we transform in a way that we could almost have instantaneous chart polls, get that in? Could we build something unique? So I built some data sets. I built a bunch of stuff out and was playing with that. And the answer was, oh my God, yes. So then stepping back and saying, okay, if I do have full clinical context now, can I now take the expertise and experience that we've had through noting, templating those components over a lifetime, and apply that together with the context, with some models, to generate just amazing notes? That answer was yes. So with that, then it's like, okay, well, if I can generate amazing notes real time, can I also use those same basic concepts and models to generate all the coding real time? And the answer was yes. So from the ground up, we said, okay, can we build an architecture infrastructure that transforms the data off the EMR into a format that is extremely usable, much more AI friendly, drive that into the models, and then generate insane performance, real time, highest quality notes possible, and codes to go along with it, so that physicians could finish their notes, finish their charges before they leave the exam room. Then we started looking at it just as, okay, if we can do all that, how can we build an entire, what I call new layer above the EMR that we can transform that data, innovate on top of that data access layer, and provide an amazing experience for the physician in the encounter, for nurses, physicians, everybody is part of that overall encounter, and then drive that all the way through to revenue generation. And once we started doing that on this platform, it's like, well, let's go the other way. Can we also, like scheduling and AI is just like, yes, it makes total sense. So can we start dealing with scheduling issues with it and go that way? So we started working on those components. Then ultimately it's like, well, what about patient engagement again? So we went out and rebuilt an entire new platform around patient engagement, all of it living within that AI layer and that data layer underneath it. The idea is that a lot of organizations today are looking at, do I replace my EMR? They're all getting long in the tooth. If you look at it, there's no real new dominant EMRs in the marketplace, and heavy investments in interfaces, training, workflow management, all that stuff over all 30 years, a lot of these organizations, and they're talking about ripping and replacing. There is zero ROI on that. I was just having a conversation with a very smart group of people the other day, and I'm like, why do people replace their EMR? Why would an organization make the decision to replace the EMR? And we could only come up with two real answers. The mainstream EMRs is what I'm talking about. One, the physicians are pissed off, or two, they're getting acquired by other organizations that already have an EMR. That's pretty much it. I get the second one because you want a consolidated record. We did nothing different at Springfield Clinic. When we acquired organizations, we put them on our platform. Quality of care, there's a lot of benefits of doing that. But if you're standalone and you're just going to switch your EMR, the main reason is physicians are pissed off. Unfortunately, all the EMRs are built on the same technology for the most part. I mean, Epic's Cache, but everyone's SQL Server based, all built basically with the same technology. The UIs are a little different. Workflows could be very different, but it's the same stuff. So even if you rip and replace, go from one to the other, it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. So what's the ROI on that? No one can give you a good answer. So for me, if physicians are pissed, let's fix that problem, because now, and whether we do it or someone else does it, there's a gazillion ambient visitors out there. There's a ton of companies out there that are providing value to physicians today that can sit somewhat on top of the EMR. So if you could fix that and you can figure out a way, what we're seeing on our capture and revenue side is dramatic. So if I can provide more revenue to you on your existing EMR and provide physician satisfaction, what is your reason for leaving? I don't know that. And I don't care what EMR you are. I don't care what EMR you are. Why would you make that change? I've heard horror story after horror story after horror stories like, oh, now we have to rebuild all of that integration to all of our different hospitals. We have to rebuild all of our interfaces. The workflows are all different. And it's just like, oh my God, why do that? So anyway, our pitch right now is that leave your EMR as the system of record. It's there, it's solid, it works, you know that, it's certified, and figure out a way to innovate on top of that, because the data transformation and the way that AI understands and stores data is so radically different that it's a different world today on how you do those integrations. I've done a lot of them. So anyway, it needs to be looked at very, very solidly before you make a huge decision like that, in my opinion. I'm being somewhat passionate on it, but it just breaks my heart every time I see someone switching EMRs and going through all that pain and suffering. And we spent all that money that could have been used somewhere else to do something else good for healthcare.
Oh, this is great. In fact, maybe I would like to see if we can set up a part 2 in some time to delve more into this problem, because I'm also curious, and I agree with you that EMRs are not going to leave the hospital, but to make it easier for and more, bring in some of the AI innovation on top of it, but also maybe serve patients. Maybe you can combine your other idea of the universal healthcare and see if there is something possible across EMRs as well, and that helps the patient. But I'd love to talk to you more about that in a future conversation. But the last thing I'll ask you is, what is your advice to a young Jim coming up say, out of college or high school or in this new world?
That's a whole separate segment.
That'll be
It's a
part
tough one.
3.
Number one is engage better with your family. Because for me, just when I get that bone of a problem, I wasn't going to let go of it until I solved the problem. A high degree of focus, but also there's damage that comes along with that. But I get the question a lot of, hey, my kid's real technical and they thinking about becoming a developer or doing that. It's a really interesting time right now because AI can do so much of the heavy lifting around coding, but AI can be extremely dangerous. Bridging the gap between a new person coming out of college, and we have interns in here in our organization currently, some folks that just came out of college. So we're working through that with them to let just AI build stuff and go crazy without any architectural oversight or understanding of how big, complex healthcare, HIPAA compliant systems work is scary. And so what we're trying to do is how do you get the expertise to get on the other side to stand that? Now we're doing things with AI to help. We're creating models to help us manage that and provide some oversight to them. But it's a weird world. So the crusty old 3-tier developers that know UI, middle tier, and databases and understand enterprise architecture, which a lot of schools don't teach, those guys are worth their weight in gold right now because they really can watch and understand as it helps you develop stuff. The newbies out there, they have to understand that and be really careful as they work through that and understand the domain. It's a simple example. I just saw it today come through on a PR that AI was recommending that we moved off of HTTP for an HTTPS stack because we're HIPAA compliant. Actually, in that specific model, it needs to be HTTP. And it was a self-contained environment. We don't need certs. We didn't need any of that. So the amount of overhead it would have added on this one architectural component was substantial, but those new developers or architects wouldn't necessarily understand this. Like, of course, it's got to be HTTPS, not in that specific case. Simple example. So I tell them, yes, you got to use AI. I tell everybody AI is not going to replace you, but somebody that using AI is going to replace you.
Yeah.
So if you absolutely refuse AI, you're done. If you figure out how to use it as part of your companion, you can be very successful and they can do a lot of stuff. There's just recently the 2 guys that created the first $1 billion company by themselves with AI, building stuff and doing, that's going to happen. Yeah. But it is out there. They need to learn it. They need to understand it. And they need to understand that it is a tool and it's not always right. And it's a pleaser, and that they have to have the common sense to be able to question and make sure it's correct. And again, there's oversight processes and everything that go along with it, but it's just a scary time. A lot of people say developers are dead. They're not dead. They need to provide oversight and do things and use it correctly. Anyway, I'll stop there.
No, that was fantastic. We made some excellent points. So thank you, Jim, for taking the time. And I'm not joking. We'll probably see you on a part 2 sometime soon, and we'll cover the rest of it then. But thank you.
That would be fun. We can start talking about just healthcare in general and EMRs. That would be great.
Yes. Thank you.